Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. This is Saul Weinreb, the host of this podcast. We are studying together the first book of Kings, that's Melachim Aleph, Perek Hey, that is chapter 5. We are about to read verse 1. And we have just at the end of chapter 4, during chapter 4, we laid out the administration of Solomon's kingdom, of his monarchy, how he divided it up into 12 regions and appointed officers over each region. We learned of his appointments, who was in charge of security, who was in charge of tax collection, and so on. And we learned that the people of Judah and Israel were united into one nation, and they were prosperous, and everyone was eating and drinking and happy. So we're going to continue on that vein and discuss the power and the might and the wealth of the kingdom of Solomon. Ushlomo haya moshel b'chol hamamlachos. Shlomo, Solomon, ruled over all of the kingdoms, min hanahar, from the river, meaning the river Euphrates, all the way Eretz Pilishtim, to the land of the Philistines, Viad Givul Mitzrayim, all the way to the boundaries of Egypt. Magisha Mincha, all of these would bring tribute to Solomon. V'ovdim et Shlomo kol yimei chayav. All of the days of Shlomo's life, they were subjects of Solomon. Now, all of those nations were conquered in the days of Shlomo's father, David, if you recall. And so Shlomo came to the throne at a time when the power of the united monarchy of Israel was at its height. Vayihi lechem Shlomo liyom echad. The amount of food that was given to Shlomo each day, in other words, Shlomo and his government, in order to run the government, was shloshim kor soles v'shishim kor kemach. 30 kor, which is a large measurement of soles, is a type of flour, and shishim kor and 60 kor of kemach is another type of flour. Asara bakar bri'im, and 10 healthy, strong or fat cattle, v'esrim bakar re'i, and 20 cattle that were pasture raised, umeat tzon, and 100 sheep, levad me'ayel utzvivi achmor, except for the ayil. This is aside from a ram and a deer and a yachmor, which is translated differently. It's some kind of a wild a roebuck, uvar burim avusim, and fattened up geese. Kihu rodeb. All this is just to impress us with the grandeur and wealth of Solomon's kingdom. Kihu rodeb b'chol varnar, because he ruled over in the everything from past the river Euphrates, mi Tifsach v'yad Azov, from Tifsach to Gaza, b'chol malchei ever hanahar, over all of the kingdoms that were on this side of the Euphrates, west of the Euphrates River. V'sholom hayalo, he had peace, mikol avarov misaviv. On all of his boundaries that surrounded him, there was peace. No one challenged the monarchy, the powerful monarchy of Solomon. Vayeshev Yehuda v'Yisrael avetach, and the people of Judah and the people of Israel lived securely. Ish tachas kapno v'tachas tena. So each person under his vine, his grapevine, and under his fig tree. Midan vad Beersheva, from the land of Dan in the north to Beersheva in the south. Kol yimei Shlomo, all of the days of Solomon. So we just drew a picture of a successful, prosperous country with a powerful king without any significant national security threats. Vayihi l'Shlomo arboim elef urvos susim l'merkavo. Shlomo had 40,000 stalls for horses, so that to ride his chariots, in other words, to carry his chariots. Ushneim asar elef parashim, and 12,000 horsemen, riders. This, of course, is in contrast to what the Torah commands, that lo yarba lo susim, that the king should not have too many horses. So we already are starting to see again the seeds of the downfall of Shlomo. At this point, it's not presented in a negative light, but one gets a little hint of negativity here. One gets a little hint of the seeds of destruction that are being sown. These governors, remember we said that the country was divided into 12 regions, and each region had a governor, and each one was in charge of delivering to the king a certain amount each month. So each one of these governors fed the King Solomon ve'es kol hakorev, and all of those who were a part of the king's court. El Shulchan HaMelech Shlomo Ish Chadsho, every month they would bring to the table of the King Solomon, Lo Ya'adru Davar, they never missed out anything, they never were deficient in anything. So this is, remember we said, Ish Tachas Kavno V'Tachas Teina, so the prosperity was so great that everyone had what they needed, so there was no problem feeding the king. There was never anything lacking. They didn't have to, so, when everybody has what they need, there's no reason for fighting, there's no reason for jealousy, there's no reason, for people to be upset about it. However, we know that once things don't go so well and people don't have what they want and there's the haves and have-nots, that's when the beginning of miscontent and strife begins. But that did not happen during the reign of Shlomo. V'hasa'orim v'hateven lasusim v'larachesh, and they would also give the barley and the straw for the horses, and for the l'arachesh is also horses that run quickly. Some translate these as mules. However, regardless, these are other animals, presumably a kind of horse, which also drove the chariots. All right, they would each bring it to the places where they were, each person according to its rule. In other words, each one of the governors would not only supply Shlomo and his people with food, but they would also supply Shlomo's animals, so that the army and the chariots and the horses that were raised to run them were all well fed. What did Shlomo do during this time of wealth? Here we learn about what he did that's positive, and that's the beautiful outcome of this wealth that gives a person an opportunity to learn, to study, to get to raise his knowledge of the world around him. And that is what Shlomo did. Vayitein Elohim chachma l'Shlomo. God gave wisdom to Shlomo, utvuna harbe miod, and a lot of understanding. V'rochav lev, he gave him a wide heart. Kachol asher al tzvasayam, a wide heart meaning the ability to broaden his perspective on things that were in the world around him, to learn about the world, to observe the world and experience it. As much as his heart was so wide, it encompassed so much knowledge, like the sea, the sand that is at the shores of the sea. Vaterev chochma Shlomo, and the wisdom of Shlomo was even greater, mechochmas kol bnei Kedem, from the wisdom of all of the people of Kedem, presumably people out in the east who are well known for their wisdom. But Shlomo's wisdom was even higher, mikol chochmas Mitzrayim, and even greater than the wisdom of the Egyptians, which was also well known to be people that were very educated and wise. But Shlomo's wisdom was even higher. Vayachkam mikol ha'adam, and he was wiser than any person. Me'eitan ha'ezrachi, wiser than Eitan from Ezrach, ve'Heman, and wiser than Heman, v'chalkol, v'darda b'nei machol, at Vayihi Shemo b'chol hagayim saviv. These are people that were obviously known in the time as people that were wise, people that were educated. Shlomo's wisdom was greater than theirs, and his reputation spread throughout all of the nations that surrounded him. Vayidaber shloshet alafim mashol, he spoke 3,000 proverbs. Presumably many of these are recorded in the book of Proverbs, which one day we'll all study together on this podcast, but we still got a while to get there. Vayehi Shiro, and his songs were Chamishava Elef, were 1,005. Presumably these are poems that Shlomo wrote. Vayidaber al ha'etzim, and he spoke and he taught, he lectured regarding the different species of trees. He discussed the cedar trees that are in Lebanon. Viado Azov, to the discussed all the way down. No, those were big grand trees, all the way down to discussing the Hyssop Asher Yotzei Bakir, which grows out of the walls. In other words, from the large trees to the small bushes. He lectured about them all, and he knew and understood botany. He knew and understood the science of the trees, and he also knew zoology. He discussed all the different kinds of animals and different kinds of birds, and the different kinds of insects, and different kinds of fish. He was an expert on all of this knowledge. So he knew song, he wrote poems, he wrote wise proverbs. He studied the land, he studied the trees and the grass, so he knew botany. And he also studied the animals. His wisdom was great and wise, and the entire world knew of how great his wisdom was. Vayavo michol ha'amim, and people would come from all the nations lishmoa et chachmas Shlomo, to hear and learn from the wisdom of Solomon. Me'ed kol malchei aretz, from all of the kings, all of the leaders of the different lands and provinces that existed in the known world at the time, all came. Asher shamu et chachmaso. Because they had heard regarding his great wisdom and how much knowledge they could gain from him. So here we have this beautiful description of Shlomo and his wisdom. And what happens, what did Shlomo do when he had the kingdom of so much wealth and so many resources and peace? What did he do? He used it to accumulate wisdom and to teach the world his wisdom. This idea that Shlomo becomes and Jerusalem becomes a center of wisdom for the entire world, that the entire world, all of the nations of the world come and learn from Shlomo and learn from the people in Jerusalem. This is central to the idea of what's going to come next, of the temple, which is meant and designed to be a source of spirituality for the entire world. This is crucial because this is the central message that we've been studying in all of the books of the prophets. The people of Israel were chosen to set up a nation that was meant to spread God's wisdom throughout the entire world. And this wisdom does not only include the knowledge of the one God and the true God and how to serve the true God with justice, with righteousness, etc., but it also includes the knowledge of science, the knowledge of nature, the appreciation of art and beauty and song. These are things that are also supposed to be spread from Jerusalem through the world. When the Jewish people are at their height, when the people of Israel have the resources and they use them properly, this is the potential, what they can do. They can be a source of knowledge for the entire world. Vayishlach Chiram. I'm going to read this verse, which really should be in the beginning of the next podcast, but I'm going to read it just as a lead-in, because it's kind of, we just said that many of these kings have heard of Shlomo and his wisdom. So there was another king that heard too, and this was Hiram, who was the king of Tzor, of Tyre, right? Which is in modern day Lebanon. Vayishlach Hiram melech Tzor et avodav el Shlomo. He also sent his servants to Shlomo, right? Ki shama, because he heard, ki oso mashchol melech dachas haviu, because he heard that Shlomo was anointed as king in place of his father. Ki ohev haya Hiram leDavid kol hayamim. Hiram was a close friend and an ally of David for many days, for much time, and Hiram heard that Shlomo had took over as his successor, so he sent his servants to Shlomo in order to cement that relationship and continue that relationship, and to learn from Shlomo. With this, we'll complete the first part of chapter 5. And we will complete chapter 5 in the next podcast, where we will study the interaction and read about the interaction between Hiram, the king of Tyre, and Shlomo, the king of Israel, and where that will lead and what their cooperation will bring. Thank you so much for studying this together. Looking forward to studying the rest of chapter 5, of course, and the rest of the book of Kings together. Have a wonderful day.